So today we're talking about imposter syndrome. And I'm going to assume maybe you could do a raise hand or an emoji raise hand if you feel like you've skidded into this session with a little bit of experience. Anybody here? Okay, some giggles, some nods, a few people out there. A little, you know what imposter syndrome is? A thumbs up, a thumbs up. I'm seeing you out there in Zoom land. 2 thumbs up. Wow, you can't do that with just emojis. Darduni Sensi gave 2 thumbs up. Shy. All right, good. All right, so good. So none of us are starting from needing to understand what it is. So we'll just start uprooting it right away. No, I want to start with, why are we talking about this in the Zendo? Why are we talking about imposter syndrome in the Zendo? And forgive me on Zoom land, I'm going to be looking down, referring to some of my notes here. But, one of the rules in Zen is to shut up unless you actually know something about something. And we call this like direct experience or interpenetration. So the truth is that these talks I'm doing this year, I'm giving 7 talks. I've given a talk on killing houseplants. I've given a talk on fighting with my spouse. I've given a talk on depression. For the rest of the year, I'm going to be giving a talk on puppies and babies that cry in the night. Today is on imposter syndrome, and each of these 7 talks meet 2 criteria. Criteria 1 is, I have direct experience with these things. These have been afflictions. They have caused pain for me and for others. But the second criteria is, I don't hear these things talked about very often in a Zendo. And why do I want those 2 criteria? The reason I want those 2 criteria is because this audience, what I wanted to do with these talks was reach 2 different audiences. One, those of you wearing gi and hakama, you can recognize them on the Zoom screen. We've got a couple of us here. For Zen students, all of life is training. So how can we take this training on the cushion and put it into daily life, in the things that actually cause pain and suffering? So for my Zen colleagues, it's another way to penetrate this training. And then there are others of you who are like, I'm maybe Zen curious, maybe, but mostly I don't care, but I suffer from these afflictions. I too fight with a spouse. I too have imposter syndrome. And my intention for that crowd is that maybe we can just give you another lens into what's happening, another way to create some ease, to ease some suffering around these things. So you don't need to have any Zen experience to participate in these talks. Any of us, all of us are human, and that's all the criteria that is required. So thank you for being with us today. So what is imposter syndrome? Well, it's familiar to all of you. It's a frenemy. It's something you'd rather keep stuck in a closet. I don't know what it is for you. Imposter syndrome, it's interesting. The term has been around since 1978. And 2 American psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, published about this in Psychotherapy, Theory, Research, and Practice, a peer-reviewed journal. And at the time, they defined it as an internal experience, get this, of intellectual phoniness. People who experience the imposter phenomena, that's what it was originally called, the imposter phenomena, persist in believing that they are really not bright and have fooled anyone who thinks otherwise. I like this definition a little bit better, feels a little more accessible, and it's more contemporary. Imposter syndrome, also called perceived fraudulence, involves feelings of self-doubt and personal incompetence that persist despite your education, experience, and accomplishments. So to me, there are 2 things going on here, right? There's a story that you're telling yourself, this perceived incompetence, despite facts to the contrary. You may actually have the experience, the education, the background. So there's the fact and there's the story that your head makes. What's interesting is in 78, when these 2 American psychologists published this, they talked about an affliction for women. And all of the studies that have been done since then, I read an article that had 62 reviewed studies, show that imposter syndrome knows no gender. And between 9 and 82% of people report having thoughts along these lines at some point, although women and people of color do tend to experience them a bit more often in the United States. So I was thinking about how to talk about imposter syndrome, and I was struck with what I hope you'll agree was kind of a bolt of insight. Picture like a movie, like a dramatic movie. Like, maybe you have your favorite one that you watch all the time, the good versus evil, right? That's often a storyline. And for there to be a good versus evil storyline, there has to be a protagonist, the good gal or the good guy, the good being, and there has to be a villain. I think Marvel Comics or DC Comics, this is really common. There's the force of good and there's the force of evil, and they're in a combat. And in most of these blockbuster movies, the storyline, right? There's always the climactic moment. And in that climactic moment, the protagonist and the villain, the hero and the villain, they may even come nose to nose, right? And you can feel the music, the drama in the background, like this is it. This is the moment when they're squaring off. And in those moments, the villain says something like, "Who do you even think you are?" Right? That is the voice of imposter syndrome, right? You, good guy, you ain't that good. What do you know? Who do you think you are? That's the prevalent voice of imposter syndrome. And what makes it, a syndrome is that it's this slippery thought pattern that some of us, how thought works. The more we think and feel something, the more that pathway gets rooted in our mind. In fact, I brought along the habit loop from those of you who did our 90-day habit training, right? So the habit loop: cue, craving, response, reward. Habits in our mind, feeling patterns, thought patterns, follow this loop. There's a cue. Maybe you're doing something for the first time. So your brain wants to think something about that. I got to make a story about that. That's the craving part of this. What story are we going to make? Oh, that old chestnut. Let's go to imposter syndrome, right? So boom, your response is, who am I to do this? Why was I asked to do this? I'm not qualified to do this. People are going to find out who I really am. And it's weird, but the reward is self-flagellation. The reward, it sounds sick, and it kind of is, but the reward is being able to repeat the loop, that familiar loop, the payoff of like, oh yeah, here I go again. Dumb Rebecca is back at it, right? So this imposter syndrome, when it really becomes a syndrome, something that is just repeated over and over and over again, we're probably turning it into a habit. So we're going to talk in just a moment about the gift of imposter syndrome and how we can uproot this habit in a skillful way that the Buddha recommended. But before we do that, in this line of Zen, we are big about put it in the body. Dardune Sensei, he's a karate master, right? We've got other people, other karate masters are in the house with us, practitioners. We've got Aikido masters. My Zen master was an Aikido master. Barbara, you practiced Aikido, right? Kelly, you're practicing Aikido. So we sit Zazen and then we do martial arts and beat the hell out of each other. What the heck is that about, right? Well, what it's about is finding a way to uproot your habits. It is not normal to do karate. It is not normal to do Aikido. You have to unlearn habits in order to be able to do that habit. So what we find in our Zen practice is this body is one hell of a good teacher. It's one hell of a good teacher. So I'm going to invite you, if you're on Zoom, turn your cameras off. And if you're here with us, close your eyes. And I'm going to invite you to do a short guided meditation. And it is about embodying the feeling, the experience of imposter syndrome. So here we go. First, bring to memory a time when you perceived fraudulence, self-doubt, and personal incompetence despite evidence to the contrary. In other words, call to mind, call to memory, an experience with imposter syndrome. Do you remember the room you were in when you experienced it? Do you remember any of the physical conditions around you? What was happening? What caused this feeling to come to mind? I invite you to remember the context as best you can. Now, still with your eyes closed, can you recall the story you were telling yourself? What was the story you were telling yourself? Now, get underneath that just a little bit. That story was about fear. What was the fear underneath that story? Now, if you're comfortable doing this, I invite you to let your body kind of re-experience the shape of imposter syndrome. Like I'm feeling myself sort of cave in over my stomach right now. What happens in your body when you doubt your skills, talents, and accomplishments? What happens in your body when you have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud? Okay, now gently hold this posture and scan your body. Start at the top, in your face, in your head. Is there tension there? What about your neck and shoulders? Imposter syndrome in your body. What does it do to your mid-body, to your torso, your belly, your pelvis, your back, down through your legs? Can you even feel your feet right now? Where is there pain or tension? Okay, we're just going to stay in this posture for another second, because now I want you to imagine that someone who loves you unconditionally and wants only the best for you enters the room that you're in and sees you in this posture. As they witness you in this posture, what is the first thing they do or say to help you? And what does your body do in response? Where does your body lighten, loosen, release? When you're ready, gently move your body back into a position where you feel grounded, centered, and at ease. Take a big breath. For my Zoomies, when you're ready, if you'd like to, I invite you to turn your camera back on. And I would invite anybody who's willing to share what happens in your body when you experience imposter syndrome? Or for my folks here, what happens in your body? These are great examples, and for my non-Zen folks in the house, obviously these are some Zen examples from karate. But what I want everybody to hear from this is our bodies are often like the check engine light on where we're at. So when your body is caved, when your posture feels like it's shrinking, when you start to get tunnel vision, these are symptoms, signals, check engine lights. Like, where are you right now? You can't feel your feet? Are you even here? Because what you're usually doing is you're living ahead somewhere. You're not in the moment. You're living ahead. So let me let's take this term of imposter syndrome apart a little bit, and then let's talk about the Zen perspective on this. So I just want to start with the word imposter, because it's two words, right? Imposter and syndrome. Let's just start with the word imposter. What is a true imposter? A true imposter. Somebody who is impersonating someone else? Maybe. I just got this, show this to you guys here. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can see it pretty well. So this is from the 16th century, I think, in Japan. And this little character, you guys can take it and pass it down. That little character is called Kagemusha. And what that character, or shadow warrior, and in feudal Japan, if a close relative looked similar to a newly dead relative, the living relative who looked sort of like the dead relative would be bribed or forced to impersonate the dead relative to whatever ends the feudal lords wanted. That is impersonation. That is an imposter, right? What else is an imposter? My sister turned me on to this podcast called Dr. Death. I listened to it during the COVID. It was probably not the wisest choice, but anyway, Dr. Death was this neurosurgeon who was inflicting significant harm, suffering, and even death on his patients. And once found out, he would be kicked out of his hospital. So you have to have like a hospital where you're of record in order to do other surgeries. And he just kept moving around. He knew he was doing damage to people, but he just kept going. That is imposter syndrome, right? Despite all contrary evidence that you are not qualified, you continue to do something, right? So as I look on this screen, I look in this dojo, none of you guys are imposters. You are who you are. So here's what an imposter is not, and here's where I think we sometimes get wrapped around the axle. I had an opportunity to talk to some of you about imposter syndrome before this talk. And there are two things that come immediately to mind. When you're in a new role, right? You've joined a new board. Maybe you don't know everything about the business of the board. I mean, if you've ever joined a higher education board, it is so confusing, the tuition discount rate and all that stuff. So you might walk into a new board meeting like, I don't know if I belong here, right? But all it is that you're in a new role. You're not an imposter. You're just in a new role, right? So, but it can feel like imposter syndrome. And you hear this a lot from people who get a new supervisory role or a new management role, or they're starting something new for the first time. Here's the other one. Someone who's learning something. Someone who's learning something is not an imposter. I have been spending Fridays, most Fridays this summer, with my godson's son. Does that make him like my grand-godson? I don't know what it is. Anyway, his name is Wendell. He's 5 and his name is Wendell. And we went to a skate park here a few blocks away. And wow, there were there was so much talent in the skate park. There were people making jumps on their skateboard. There were people on fancy bikes. They were like spinning in the air. There were a lot of really good skaters and bikers tearing it up at the skate park. They had a brown Lazy Boy recliner, and they had it between two jumps. And like people would take turns laying on it while people would jump over it on their skateboard or on their bicycle. Some people here in the house are shaking their head like, oh dear God. But it was fascinating to watch because every time you were like, is this the time the person in the recliner gets killed? So Wendell had never seen anything like this before. So he and I are sitting there and we're watching all this, both of us like kind of mouth agape. And not kind of where you guys are sitting. It was not far away from us. There were some people there was one person in particular who was just learning simple tricks, like how to flip your skateboard. And this person was not successful. And then the colleague, the friend, was like kind of, yelling at them in that way that friends do, like, you dummy, you're never going to get this, just do it the way I showed you, whatever. And Wendell was sitting over here to my right. So it was Wendell, me, and then these two people, just like this setup. Wendell says in his outside voice, wow, why is that guy so bad? He's 5. It was just an observation. And I mean, relative to everybody else, that kid was bad, really bad. Couldn't even flip his skateboard. But I turned to Wendell, and I don't know if this was a mistake or not. I don't have kids. I just damage other people's kids, I guess. I turned to Wendell and I said, Wendell, this kid's not bad. This kid just doesn't have the same amount of experience as everybody else. Like anytime you start something new, you're not good at it because it takes a lot of practice to be good at it. And I want to reinforce that today in this talk because that kid wasn't trying to pose as a massive, awesome skateboarder, but he wasn't as good. And he wasn't as good because he was just getting started. So being in a learning mode doesn't make you an imposter. I just got a shakuhachi, and I am learning how to blow a note, and it is not going well. So in some areas of my life, I'm kind of killing it. In shakuhachi, I am definitely not killing it, So that doesn't mean I'm an imposter. It just means that I'm learning. So I wonder now, with these two definitions of what an imposter isn't, an imposter is not somebody in a new role, and an imposter is not somebody that's learning something. If you apply those two criteria to the times you have felt like an imposter, were you really an imposter? Or were you just somebody who was starting new or learning something? I want to give you a really neutral example of where we can get in our own way on imposter syndrome. Last week, my wife and I were in North Carolina. Her mom passed away, and we were attending the memorial service. And then we extended for a few days because we thought, let's just take time. Let's take time. And we were in North Carolina, and we went for a couple of hikes in the Pisgah National Forest. Beautiful. And we were hiking a trail called Twin Falls, and there was a fair amount of, let me say this, this was not a hike that you would hike with open-toed sandals. There was dirt, mud, twigs, trip hazards. And so we all had one of those walking sticks, those expandable walking sticks. And I'm right-handed. So I had my walking stick in my right hand for most of the time. And then I thought, I wonder what it would be like to put it in my left hand. Boop. So I flipped it over to my left hand, and I was like hitting stuff with it, and it was not fluid. It was not cute. And I literally thought to myself, because I was getting ready for this talk, would my left hand right now be saying, I'm such a fake, I'm such a phony, I obviously cannot do the walking stick like the right hand can? No. I mean, number one, hands don't talk, right? But number two, the bigger point here is that this is a very neutral example. One thing is not as good as the other thing. It's got less cellular memory, less experience, probably less strength. But that doesn't make it an imposter, right? Nor are you an imposter when you've got less experience, less strength, less muscle memory. So we know what imposter syndrome is. We know how it can manifest in our body. We know that our body can be a check engine light. So what does the Buddha say about this? What does Zen practice have to offer this? Well, I think the first thing is that if you wait to work on your imposter syndrome until it strikes, you're too late, right? You're too late. When I was playing professional basketball, I used the off season to improve my game. I used the off season to get stronger. I used the off season to get faster. I used the off season to do my ball handling skills and, you know, whatever I felt I was going to need to take it to the next level. Because once I got into season, all my time and energy was spent practicing with my team. So if you want to have a more skillful response to imposter syndrome, if you want to let this thing go once and for all, don't wait until it strikes. Start doing the work to figure out the conditions, right? So the corollary in Zen is we sit on these cushions every day, every single day. Why? Because we're developing in ourselves that immovable stability that we might need someday. We might need when we get the phone call. We might need when we get the diagnosis. We might need when a friend really needs us. We might need when we face our own death. You know, if we wait until the moment of need to develop the stability, it's too late. It's too late. So let's talk about these 5 strategies. So for the Zen nerds, this is not from one of the canons that is in our greatest hits that we study at Chosei Zen. This is in a different sutra. It's called the Vitika Sutra. I'm happy to send it to you, but the English translations could be the removal of distracting thoughts, the discursively thinking mind, and the relaxation of thoughts. And what I love about this is the Buddha gives these 5 strategies. What does that tell me? What it tells me is the Buddha was like, damn, I have suffered from this myself. The Buddha wasn't born enlightened. You know, the Buddha fought with the same imposter syndrome, the same distortions, the same monkey mind that we all deal with, right? So what I love about this is it's like, my God, if the Buddha can do it, we can do it, right? So these 5 strategies are translated by this woman, Shayla Catherine. I'm happy to pass any of this along to those of you who want it, but let's talk about strategy number 1. And these strategies go deeper. So the first one is like the easy one. The second one gets a little harder. By the time we get to the 5th one, it is strong medicine, y'all. And Kelly kind of alluded to it. Okay, strategy number 1, replace unwholesome thoughts with wholesome thoughts. So in this case, the unwholesome thought is imposter syndrome, that perceived fraudulence that's not grounded in reality or truth. It's a perception. It's like a story that you're telling yourself. So, you know, Jimmy talked about in his example, at first he was like, who am I to do this? And then he replaced it with, there must have been a reason why I was asked to do this, right? So it's just a replacement. You have to notice, I'm thinking this unwholesome thought, what can I replace it with? What can I replace it with? A little hack I use, I just had a pretty serious bout of imposter syndrome at the beginning of the month. I was giving a brand new keynote, and by brand new, I mean it was all new content. And I had never been to this community before, and I am rusty. You know, I used to give 20 to 30 talks a year, and now I've given like 7 in the last year because of the COVID. So for all these reasons, I was kind of melting down in my hotel room. That's what I was bringing to mind when we were doing our embodiment exercise. And at some point, when I realized that the blood was running out of my legs, and I thought, oh, here's imposter syndrome, old friend. The first thing I did, and I did it aloud to myself, was I said aloud, is this true? Or is this something I'm telling myself? You know, because I was like, I'm going to bomb tonight. This is a shitty talk. Who's going to listen? Why do they even have me here talking about this? So is this true? Or is this something I'm telling myself? So that's kind of under strategy 1. Strategy 2, examine the dangers of distracting thoughts. This to me is like a road sign that says danger ahead. Like you can continue to go down this pathway, but your truck might fall off a cliff, right? Danger ahead. So if strategy 2 is like, okay, let's play this through. Let's play this thought through. I'm a fraud. I'm an imposter. I'm not qualified. I don't belong here. And ask yourself, if I keep thinking this, where am I going to be in 10 minutes? 10 minutes from now, where am I going to be? A better place or a worse place? What about 10 days? What about 10 years? Right? So just play that through. Is this the road I want to stay on? Is this useful for me in my life? That's strategy 2. Strategy 3, I have never heard before, but I kind of love it. Strategy 3 is ignore it, avoid it, forget it. You know, and so often in Zen, we're like, face the enemy, just face the enemy. But listen, we have this in our daily life. You know, that asshole at work? You just avoid running into the asshole at work, right? His behavior's not improving, or her behavior or their behavior is not improving. Things aren't getting better. Sometimes the best thing you can do is change your relationship to it by avoiding it, ignoring it, forgetting it. And what this really does, what the Buddha says this does, is it starves the thought. Because you're just not giving more attention to it. Just stop giving it fuel. Strategy 4. This is the one I'm on right now with my imposter syndrome. Strategy 4, investigate the causes of distraction, of the discursive thought, excuse me. So what conditions are present for you when you have imposter syndrome? I bet there's a rhythm to it. Some of the ways that I come to a question like this is I always try to feel it in my body. Where in my body do I feel this? And so I talked about the blood leaving my legs. Okay, I can feel this in my legs. When are other times that I have felt that feeling? And I'm going back a ways, but every time before the opening tip-off in a basketball game, the blood would leave my legs. What does that mean? That might mean I have some performance anxiety. Like, I don't get this feeling when I'm sitting down to write a plan. I don't get this feeling when I'm coming online with you guys. Like, so there's some information here. So what are the causes of this? What are the common contexts? How old were you the last time you felt this or the first time you felt this? There are breadcrumbs to this. And can you follow them back and follow them back and follow them back and follow them back? And like Kelly, I'm thinking about you. I don't know that this is true, but the breadcrumb could have been as easy as I got a shit ass night of sleep last night. Like my physical energy was waning, you know? I don't know if that's true or not, but just notice the conditions when these thought distortions arise. And then finally, strategy 5. Strategy 5 is to apply determination and resolve. But this is I want to read you the translation of what the Buddha said. With his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush his mind with his awareness. So this is the strongest medicine. What this medicine is, and some people might be like, oh man, I thought Zen was not like violent, like crush with your awareness, beat down, constrain, and crush. But this is what they're talking about. That last phrase is crush his mind with his awareness. Okay? So the mind is that hapless wandering Pac-Man that's putting thoughts into your head, right? And your awareness is the part of you that can see that Pac-Man going all over, gobbling things up, dropping things around. So this is the strongest medicine, because this, and it takes some practice, but when you notice this imposter syndrome villainous sneer, that is the time to say, I see you. I see you. That's bringing the light of awareness to it. So the translator of these 5 strategies said that she hardly ever has to use strategy 5. She can usually use strategies like 1 through 3. But I encourage you to use your own, let your own experience be the good. Don't take it from me. Don't take it from me. Use this with your own imposter syndrome. Now, the final thing I want to mention is that imposter syndrome can be a great gift. I actually think imposter syndrome is a close relative to a Zen koan. And this is what I mean. The next time you sense that imposter syndrome, pay attention to the tone. Because if the tone has that curled lip and those narrowed eyes and that sneer, who do you think you are? Right? You recognize that there's some self-flagellation in there. There's some loathing in there, some maybe self-loathing in there. But what I would encourage you to consider is that if you tilt that statement just a little bit, so the imposter syndrome, sort of the characteristic statement is, who do you think you are? And if you just tilt it a little bit, it becomes a Zen koan, which is, who are you? Who are you? And I've had 2 direct experiences with this in the Sanzen room. So Sanzen is the interview that you have with your teacher. So your teacher gives you this koan to work on, and then every time you train with your teacher, you come to her, him, them twice a day usually, and you try to come with an answer. And 9 times out of 10, your answer is wrong, and they ring a little bell, and you limp out of the room, and you go back and you sit some more, right? But ever so often, you get it right. You bring something that encourages the teacher that you actually understand the koan. And I remember with my very first koan, and my teacher is White Law Roshi, I knew I hadn't made progress with my koan. And so I came in, and you do this little bowing sequence, and you come in, and then you say to your teacher, my koan is whatever it is, and then you give your answer. So I told my teacher what my koan was, and then I tried to give some funny answer. Like, I tried to kind of crack her up. And humor traditionally is very effective for me. Some of you are laughing right now, but you're laughing because you know the punchline, not because I'm funny. White Law Roshi said to me, who would you be if you weren't so clever? Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Who am I if I'm not so clever? The second time I had an interaction with a Roshi around this slightly modified imposter question, the Zen koan of it being, who am I? Was one summer sesshin. So we're in the dojo right now where summer sesshin just ended this morning. So they've been here since Monday night training, 6 days of intensive training, including staying up all night the last night, right? I can feel the ki in this space from all their hard work. And one summer, Gordon Green Roshi decided he was really going to put the screws to all the students. There were 3 Roshis in attendance, and he said, guess what, Zen students? You're going to go to Sanzen with every single Roshi 3 times a day. That is 9 Sanzen interviews every single day. You know, we talk a lot about training, like you want the pot to boil. You know, you want the student to penetrate and bump up against frustration and to just keep working through the delusive mind. And so I thought about, the pot boiling, right? Like I thought, Jesus, he doesn't just want the pot to boil. He wants the pot to spontaneously combust, because it was Green Roshi, White Law Roshi, and Honda Roshi. Those are the 3 Roshis. I mean, these are some Generation 1 Roshis. They have seen some stuff, and they are suffering no fools. So none of my stupid tricks are going to work with these people, right? So, and this is how it would work. You would like line up for one Roshi, and then you would go to the next Roshi, and then you'd go to the next Roshi. So I always started with White Law Roshi because she was my Roshi. And then I'd run to Honda Roshi, which felt like about a quarter mile away. And then I have to run to Green Roshi, which was another half mile up a hill. You guys know the dojo, right? So it was physically exhausting. It was just exhausting. So I get in front of Honda Roshi. I do my bowing sequence. I tell him what my koan is. And then I say, and my answer is blah, whatever I said. And then he said, who is asking? I was like, well, that stops the mind right there. Shit, I don't know who's asking, right? But I share both of these examples. Who would you be if you weren't so clever? And who is asking about this koan? Because this gets to, who do we think we are? Who do we think we are? If I just say it with a gentler tone, and I say it with positive regard for you, who do you think you are? Do we believe that we're our thoughts? Do we believe that we're our thinking mind? Your thoughts are going to be different in 2 minutes. Does that mean you're different? Do we believe that we're our habits? No, I'm just a collection of habits. Well, guess what? Your habits change over time. Or if you got some news that you had to go to Houston and be treated for a terminal cancer by a specialist, all of your habits would be stripped away. Would you be a different person in Houston than you are right now? Do you believe that you're your body, which is really just molecules, carbon? Most molecules are nothing but air. And if you do believe that you're your body, you had a body when you were 6, and you have a body now. Are you a different person? Are you the same person? Who are you really? I think about this for myself. Rebecca. Am I Rebecca? Well, it's a label, but it only matters to the people who know me. Only you guys know that label. I'm going to leave this place. Nobody's going to know what that label is. So do I stop existing because that label Rebecca doesn't work for everyone else? You know, if you just take out one document from your wallet, your driver's license, it has a label for your gender. Is that who you are? It has a label for your eye color, but some of you were born with a different eye color than you have now. And some of your eyes change color depending on the light and what you're wearing. Are you that label? Your hair color has a label too. My label has changed over time. And so has Dardune Sensei's label, right? So is that a label? Is that who we are? I have a label that's a number for my height and my weight, and that changes too. Are those labels who I am? Who are you? This driver's license is your primary source of identification. It has your name, your gender, all these labels. Is it who you are? Who are you really? So if we take this imposter syndrome and we just nudge it a little bit from who do you think you are, fraud, to who are you really? It becomes a beautiful koan to train with. Final words. Here are the markers I know for sure are a sign that you are not an imposter. Only 3. Humility. Imposters don't have humility. They're shameless. 2, do you speak from your direct experience? Only imposters give people a full line of bullshit, and they believe it about themselves and expect other people to believe it. And then 3, can you be who you are and do what you do, third characteristic, without embellishment or exaggeration? Who would you be, Rebecca, if you weren't so clever? That's going to be a wrap for today. I want to thank you for your sincere practice. If you feel so inclined, today is the last day. We are in the last week of our annual fundraising drive. You can make a donation on the choseizen.org website if you feel called to do so. And I will be back. We're going to take the summer off for these talks. The next talks will be Sunday, September 25th, about the child or puppy that cries through the night. Sunday, October 23rd, about taking a stand and activism. And Sunday, November 20th, that talk is going to be about that asshole at work. So, this is probably a good time to say these are not for little kids. This is like a PG-13/R-rated Zen talk. Okay, so with that, let's have a gusho.